Dr. Robin Berzin, welcome to the Motherly Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I am beyond excited to be here. This is one of my favorite podcasts, so it's such an honor to be on.
This is very exciting. The feeling is mutual. All right, we have a lot to learn from you. You are a doctor, a health expert, and the mother of 3 little children. So I guess I want to start out by asking, what was it about motherhood that maybe surprised you, especially from like a physical experience and a mental health standpoint?
So I was really apprehensive to have our first kid, and my husband was more of the like, let's do this. I always knew I wanted children in the abstract sense, but when it came time to actually like having them, that seemed rather daunting. And so I think the thing that surprised me the most was that for me, motherhood has been an expansion of who I am rather than a contraction. And what I mean by that is I had all these ideas when I was pregnant the first time, or before I even got pregnant the first time, that I would have to give up all these things about myself, that I would have to give up my friends, that I couldn't be an effective business person, that I would have to sort of narrow my life into this new role. And what I learned was that it actually expanded who I was, and my capacity to be many people in one was there, but I didn't know it. And I think that is something that I always tell my friends and patients and whomever when they're contemplating having kids, is that it's actually not about giving up who you are.
I want to talk a lot about how we can together and with so many advocates with a new generation of mothers build a motherhood that is additive and life-giving and not depleting and synonymous with burnout as it has been for so many mothers. But I guess I'm also curious, how did you prepare for your pregnancies? How did you approach them because of all that you know about wellness and well-being? Because a lot of our listeners are new moms or thinking about having a baby, and you've been there on many levels. So were there certain things that you did to prepare maybe the first time, but then also even with your second and third?
Yeah. I think at first I did the things that we prescribe at Parsley, and we have this whole pregnancy protocol around fertility optimization and where that begins. And then we have a whole protocol around during pregnancy and how we manage that, and then postpartum. But for me, because I was like literally in it, I was starting Parsley, and then I got pregnant and was raising our first seed round in 2017. And so it's like a whole kit and caboodle. Like Parsley was kind of my first baby, but it was like all mooshed together. But, I knew that, first of all, I got off birth control quite a ways before, which I always recommend to everyone to do, because we've been told something that I have seen as false, which is that you go off birth control and you can just like get pregnant the next month. And the problem with that is a lot of women have underlying issues with their hormones, PCOS, blood sugar issues, endometriosis, all sorts of stuff. That hormonal birth control, like the pill, has covered up for a long time, but not fixed. We have to remember that the pill is not a fix for these problems. The pill is a mask for these problems. And so they're still out there. And a lot of times they've gotten worse because you're older, or, you didn't have to pay attention to them while you were on these forms of hormonal birth control. And so my patients, I got off of birth control quite a ways before so that I could make sure that my periods were regular, that if I needed any cycle support, like some progesterone in the second half of cycle, which will do a lot to help people kind of reset their cycles, that I had anything underlying going on, like a thyroid issue, that I could check and address that. Started taking my prenatals, made sure I got rid of, as much as possible, heavy metals. So got rid of mercury, and stopped eating fish like tuna that have a lot of mercury in them, because whatever stored in your body is going to go into baby. And so I also can recommend for women, and what I'm about to say, by the way, is not about weight loss in any way, but it's about just setting your body up for successful pregnancy. A detox of sorts, just cutting out alcohol, cutting out processed and packaged foods, getting rid of the high mercury fish, and doing some testing and taking a time to just invest in your body. Because if you don't fill your tank with gas before, what you said earlier, like I feel burnout sometimes. I'm depleted. Like there's no way I'm not doing everything that I do, but I know that I have to fill up the tank as much as I take it out. And I see a lot of women and a lot of my patients forgetting that step. They just keep drawing on an empty tank rather than filling up that tank, knowing that it's going to be drawn on again. And so I did those things pre-pregnancy. It took me a few months to try, and then we were lucky and got pregnant. And then we have a whole pregnancy support protocol where we do testing regularly throughout pregnancy, because a lot of times the other thing I think that I try to prepare our patients for, that I knew for myself going in, but that it was weird to see firsthand as a patient as opposed to being the doctor, is that, listen, our OBGYNs are amazing. They're wonderful people. They're like literally my heroes, but they're focused on baby. They're not focused on you largely. They're focused on the health of your pregnancy. And so a lot of women lack support for their health during pregnancy. And so we have a whole testing protocol that we do at least twice, ideally every trimester during pregnancy, where we're looking at thyroid, we're looking at nutrient levels, we're looking at some of the stuff that can go awry with you that the OBs skip because they're like, well, the pregnancy's okay. And so I had all that knowledge around kind of how to prep myself. And then I also have the knowledge of how to take care of myself during, and then putting gas back in the tank afterwards. And I can talk about that in detail, what that means. But that is like one of the top things. We have so many women who come to Parsley, so many moms, and we recommend they usually come about 6 weeks postpartum, because that's when your OB is like signing off.
They don't care about you anymore. You're done.
Ciao for now. Off you go. And it's a very superficial interaction at that visit, and even the one before it to some degree. Great, you're not bleeding anymore. You don't have mastitis. You checked a box and said you're not depressed. Cool, bye. And so at 6 weeks is when our members are coming back postpartum. Usually we're recommending before if they need something, or during as they're working with us during. But postpartum, we kind of kick off 6 weeks, because that's when hormones are shifting. We can see anxiety and depression actually flare. I see a lot of postpartum anxiety and depression happening after the 6 week period, not before, but we sort of drop off there in our medical community, doing testing again to see what's happening in the body, and then beginning to help a woman begin her healing journey, because we just, in our typical medical community, we don't have any support for that.
I experienced all of what you're describing especially when I first had a child almost 10 years ago. I felt very abandoned and, expected a lot more than I was able to get. Contrast that with the approach that you're describing, which belongs to an approach called functional medicine. Not all of our listeners know what functional medicine is, what makes it different from normal, standard, conventional medicine. So can you just talk about both what is functional medicine, and then why you came to a place of saying, I'm going to begin this functional medicine clinic, first of its kind, and what that was like for you, what the decision was?
So functional medicine, for everyone listening, is an approach to medicine where we ask why. We focus on getting to something called the root cause. So your migraines and my migraines and your friend's migraines and your mom's migraines might have all different causes. One could be due to a food allergy. Dairy can be a big driver of migraines. Another can be caused by stress and tense muscles. Another can be due to magnesium deficiency. Another could be due to a hormone imbalance or a thyroid issue that hasn't gone detected. So when we practice functional medicine, we are conventional medicine doctors, board certified, trained at top medical institutions, and we're using the best of conventional medicine, the best of primary care. But then with the functional approach, we also do this in-depth analysis at the beginning to proactively ask why. And we do that through a very in-depth history that looks at how you were born, vaginally or C-section, the medications and conditions you've had throughout your life, including in childhood, the traumas you've experienced, what you're eating, how you're moving, your relationships, how you manage stress, your environment, because we know that these things drive 90% of health outcomes, but they're not even addressed in the conventional medicine setting. And then in addition to that very in-depth intake, which you know, we do a lot of testing, and we look at blood work that looks at, again, looking at the why. We standardly look at things like thyroid markers and inflammation and nutrient levels and hormones, things that we know we need to look at proactively because we need to look at how your body's functioning as a whole. And then we use all that. Everything I just said is data, right? And we use that very different data set than a regular doctor to understand the why, and then we treat that. So what I mean by that is we prescribe nutrition very seriously, so hyper-specific nutrition protocols. We prescribe mental health practices and well-being practices like meditation. We prescribe proven supplements, so these are high-quality, doctor-only types of supplements. We prescribe drugs. We refer to specialists, so if you need a colonoscopy or a procedure like a pap smear or something like that, we'll refer to that. And so you don't have to pick and choose between a more holistic approach and a conventional approach. You get both in one place. And as a result of all of that, we see these incredible outcomes where we're able to help people actually resolve the why. And so if your migraines are caused by dairy allergy, we're going to tell you to stop eating dairy. And a pain medication might be helpful in managing the migraines you have, but what we want to do is get rid of them, just to use that simple example. And we do this over and over again. And so we see a lot of gastrointestinal issues, a lot of fertility, preconception, optimization, frequent miscarriage, just people who were told they would never get pregnant without IVF, helping them get pregnant on their own, or if appropriate, supporting them through their fertility and IVF journey. And we do a lot of that support too. A lot of autoimmune. People don't know that 80% of autoimmune disease occurs in women. This is your rheumatoid arthritis, your Hashimoto's, your lupus. It's one of the fastest growing disease categories, actually. Heart health, blood sugar, of course, because those are everywhere. And then we do a lot of mental health. And a lot of people come to us for anxiety, depression, brain fog. And we're not psychiatrists, but because we are asking why, oftentimes we're able to link some of the things that are happening in the body that are interrupting mental health. And just to answer, the reason I got so obsessed with this medicine and wanted to bring it together with conventional primary care to offer this comprehensive service like way back when is really because I remember being in my residency training here in New York. I was at Mount Sinai, and in our outpatient like primary care clinics, we had 15 minutes, and we would spend 2 of those minutes, or I would spend 2 of those minutes printing out prescriptions, and they were 4 to a page, and I'd be frantically signing them. And I was only able to focus on like one problem, and I wasn't able to ask why. And most of what I was doing was refilling. And I looked at these people who were coming with all the things I just said, the GI stuff, the autoimmune, the mental health, the fertility, the hormone, whatever it was. And I could see that they were just in a revolving door. Quick visits with me, going off to specialists, going to the ER, searching Dr. Google, filling another prescription, but they weren't getting better. And so I learned about the field of functional medicine, and I subsequently trained in it, and I was lucky to have that experience. And so that really inspired me to say, why can't we just bring these worlds together so that you have one place to go for amazing medicine, but also for this functional holistic approach that can be game changing. And so that was like the inspiration, and here we are. All these years later.
You not only have launched this amazing company and are raising 3 little kids, you also wrote a new book, which has a beautiful cover, State Change. It's called State Change: End Anxiety, Beat Burnout, and Ignite a New Baseline of Energy and Flow. Like, who doesn't want that? But also, what mom doesn't need all of that? Because we are certainly living in this era of mom burnout. And as a tired mom myself, one theme in the book that I really related to was a paradigm shift that you presented, which was that one cannot think their way into being healthy. For example, I really struggle with exercise. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. And for maybe a decade or more, I've thought maybe one day when I'm really motivated, when I'm thinking my way into exercise, I'll do it. But your book, just in that example, what I took away was it's about doing the acts of well-being, nourishing your body with healthy foods, getting enough sleep, having a supportive work and family life, and moving your body in ways that feel good. And when you do the behaviors of health, your mind will follow. And that mental health can even come from physical health. Well, that blew my mind because for 10 years I've been waiting to be ready to work out. But I'm thinking about this paradigm shift in relation to all the barriers that mothers have in being healthy. So can you talk about almost the prioritizing physical health for mothers and helping mothers feel empowered to prioritize their own physical health, and how their mental health will then follow, and how that will sort of lead to a much more resilient generation, because we all know mothers put their own physical and mental health last.
We do, right? And we are depleted, and being a mom is tiring, period. It's not your fault. You didn't do something wrong. You're not like the wrong mom who's tired. You're just normal. That is what it is. It's exhausting to raise young children, right? And so because of that, if you are going to be able to do that and maintain the sense of self, right? Maintain your passions, do your work inside or outside the home, maintain your partnerships, and be the mom you want to be, but also be the person that you want to be, you have to refill your tank, as I said earlier, and you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, right? Or you're not going to be able to do these things. And I think as moms, what I would say is that starts with listening to ourselves and like taking a beat to listen to ourselves, because these symptoms that you feel are not there to be bothersome to you. The symptoms that you feel, the body pain, the exhaustion, the anxiety, the inability to sleep, the digestive issues, the brain fog, these things are not there as irritants. They're there because your body's trying to tell you something. Your body has wisdom and a message for you. And it's trying to get you to listen. And if you don't listen and don't listen and don't listen, eventually it's going to be louder and louder and louder until it takes you out, right? And so taking that beat to listen to yourself and hear that in the body, what that wisdom is from the body to you, can be that kind of starting place. And exercise is a great example. I'm not an exerciser. I hate the gym. I grew up in like a sports culture that I didn't identify with, and so I wasn't good at sports. So I was always like, great, whatever. And I was a brain, right? I was a nerd. So that was really hard for me. And I equated exercise, and I share this in the book, with like, oh, it's a should, right? It's like, I need to look fit. I need to look hot. I need to fit into a certain pair of clothes or jeans or whatever. And so then the last thing we as moms need is another should. And so of course that's why exercise gets out the window. But when you reframe that as exercise and movement is how we move emotions out of the body. We as human beings are designed to process emotions through physical movement. This is proven in the literature. This is well researched. And so when we don't move, when we sit all day, or when we're at home in a pandemic and not going anywhere, our emotional energy gets stuck. And those emotions are linked to neurohormonal cascades or waves through the body that are chemical, that have real health repercussions. And so when you reframe exercise as, this is what I'm doing to refill my tank, to feel better, to be able to sleep again, to be able to find calm and clarity, to have energy, to not feel so lethargic, it takes on new meaning. And that's what's been really powerful for me personally, is I moved to feel good, and I moved to move the emotions out so that they don't stay in my body and create disease.
I loved that. I read one of your protocols was just around moving in ways that feel good, instead of, and it was almost, to be honest, it sounded like a more feminine way of talking about exercise and movement. And what I often see is like, you need 45 minutes of cardio 5 days a week. And that feels like a masculine energy and punishment, and it's so hard, and it has to be overwhelming. So I appreciated just the softer and feminine approach to body movement, which is frankly what I need. And I know many of us do when we go from pregnancy and postpartum recovery. We need a more gentle approach. So that's a brilliant example. But I also wonder, what are some of the other life-giving, body and mind fueling health practices that would be the top of your list for mothers who are feeling depleted?
Yeah. Well, there's a few. And I love what you said earlier, which is you can't think your way out of this problem, right? Because I think that we're told, as moms, but also as people, that mental health is in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that, that can feel really daunting. Where do I start? Or do I just wait for that therapist appointment? Or there's something wrong with me in the way that I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, they're experiencing anxiety, depression, burnout. For some, it's trauma. For some, it's hereditary. And for many others, it's coming from the way that they're living their lives and from modern life and simply the stress that we're all under, which is totally normal for any human to respond to in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, I love that you can't think your way out of the problem. And yet there hasn't been like a concrete roadmap. It's like, well, if you're just going to get stuck and spin out thinking about it, then like, what do you do?
Right.
And so that's what the book is about. And this exercise and movement is about, I don't even like calling it exercise, it's movement, because movement is one way out. And it's not about the 45 minutes and you're a failure if you don't. It's how can I move today that's going to help me feel more relaxed? How can I move today that's going to relieve my tight muscles and get me out of this pattern of thinking? And for me, that's walking, that's yoga. Sometimes it's stuff that's more, high powered, but sometimes it's not. And that is the game, right? And so in terms of the list of other things that we can do, first one that I recommend to literally everyone, and I think that moms need this more than anyone because we all need like a timeout. You like give your kids a timeout, but are you ever like, I wish that I too could have your timeout?
Yeah.
Put me in my room alone.
Oh, I know. I want a nice lady to put me down in my room with the soft blanket and say, go be alone. That sounds nice.
And tell me to feel my feelings, not come out until I do. Well, gosh, that would be great, right?
Love that.
So, part of that is adopting a meditation practice. And I talk about the science of meditation in the book, which is it's free. Anyone can do it. Meditation sounds woo-woo and, maybe it sounds a little hard to sort of wrap your arms around, which I can understand. So meditation can just be a simple breathing practice. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. Set a timer on your phone. Do it for 2 minutes. Meditation can be cooking a meal, but bringing your attention to that action and noticing when your brain is flying out to the future or the past, or your brain is latching on to what I call problem energy, right? Sometimes we just work that problem over and over and over again, and it's not getting us anywhere. So bringing your attention to the present moment, or it could be a visualization or a mantra or another type of body scan or meditation. But meditation has been proven to rewire our brains, to lower our blood pressure, to lower our heart rate, to stimulate healthy digestion, to drive better focus. And I just know that it's been game changing for me. And we prescribe meditation about 10 times more than medication at Parsley. We do prescribe drugs all the time, but we prescribe meditation as an intervention because of the scientific evidence for how it can massively improve both mental and physical health. So that's one I would start with. And nutrition and sleep and technology are others I write about, but we can talk about those. But meditation's where I would start if you just need something easy and accessible to do.
People who listen to the podcast, I talk about meditation way too often because it totally changed my life in the last 4 years. So you can't talk about meditation enough here on the Motherly podcast. But let's talk a bit about nutrition. In my own reading over the last couple of years about functional medicine, lots of writers, popular voices, popular nutritionists have helped me understand food as fuel for every cell in our body. And I realized food is one of the only things I ever put into my body to help this vessel that I'm going to be in for the rest of my life. And yet so many of us as moms, and I've been there, only eat standing up, eat the scraps of our kids' meals, and maybe overindulge at, once everyone's in bed. What do moms need to know about the power of nutrition for their own real sort of daily wellness and happiness?
Not only is food fuel for your body, it's fuel for your mind. And your brain fog, your anxiety, your low mood, these things could all be linked to what you're eating. So that can be from food allergies. One of the most common manifestations of a gluten sensitivity is actually irritability and brain fog, not a digestive issue. So you could be like, I feel fine when I eat bread. But if you're having some of these mood symptoms, that could be triggering it. Another thing to know is that most of us eat too much sugar, too many refined carbohydrates, which is effectively sugar. So your pastas, breads, your crackers, all that stuff is just sugar in your body. And yet most of us eat 70% roughly of our diet is processed packaged food. And most of those foods are filled with three things. Refined carbohydrates and sugar, too much salt, which again, salt's actually a really great thing if used in cooking and we need a good amounts of it, but in packaged or processed foods, it's used as like a preservative and a filler and all these weird things. And so it gets like a massive amount of it. And then vegetable oils. So our omega-6 fats, which are highly inflammatory to the body. These are things like your vegetable oil, your corn oil, your grapeseed oils. These oils have a type of fat in them called omega-6s, which are depleting our cognitive function, which are inflammatory to the body. We need some of them, but we get way too much of them. And we don't get enough omega-3 fats, which are coming from your sardines and your walnuts and your olive oils, like your pure olive oils. So one of the things that I walk people through in the book, and I give you a 30-day plan to follow to be able to put this all into action, because words are useless if we don't put them into action, right? Is just understanding where these foods that are depleting your mental health can be, how to understand them, and then what to eat instead. And I think for me, one of the things that's the most helpful is that I don't like the concept of kid food. And I don't like the concept of like feeding my kids one kind of food that then I sort of feel bad about or need to avoid. Like the kids eat what we eat. And they eat the vegetables and they eat the rice and they eat the quinoa and they eat the avocado and they eat the meat and the fish. And we try to get them used to spices. And it's like, yeah, at school or parties or whatever, they're going to get all this other stuff. But I can make my life easier by just feeding them what I know is good for my mental and emotional and physical well-being, make it the way I like it, and then they're going to eat it. And I think we're marketed to a lot. And I'm curious to hear what you think about this, because you must see so many products, I'm imagining, like want your attention and want your community's attention. But most of them are packaged and processed from what I can see. And even if they have a little green leaf on them, or they say they're organic, or they say they're gluten-free or something, it doesn't mean they're healthy. And I think that we can learn to make food fast while also being something that breeds better mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah. You know, we got a complicated food situation in my house. I've been a vegetarian for 20 years. Yeah. I'm actually thinking of being slightly unvegetarian as I go down my functional medicine journey, because I have a suspicion that I'm depleted in some key categories. I'm definitely looking at, ethical salmon, what's the most ethical way I can introduce some healthy fish. One of my sons has a lot of sensory issues, so he pretty much eats 4 foods. And my husband loves tons of meats and is like super into things like sardines, which I know are great for you, but I can't really handle that right now in my own vegetarian journey. So it's complicated here, but certainly goal is families eating the same meal, and then it's a little bit flexible to everyone's personal preferences.
Yeah.
So that would be my goal.
Kids are picky too, right? Now my older one is, and he wants certain things and not others, right? But it's like, how can you create that mix, right? Where there's things that you all can eat. And it is tough. My husband's also super into meat, and I'm mostly pescatarian.
Exactly.
So.
It's that. I want to ask about you a little bit in the context of your own well-being journey. In your book, you talk about how you were training in your 20s through your medical career and came to your own realization about how unhealthy you were and decided to really proactively do something about that. But I'm curious, now you run a hugely fast-growing startup and you have 3 little kids. I'm sure, I can guess, you've had some times of feeling really depleted. And could you talk about what those moments have been like? And also, what happened? When did you get depleted? And then what did you prescribe for yourself? Because I think also what a lot of our listeners need is the ability to kind of be able to look at their own situations and help put themselves first, and be self-advocates towards themselves for themselves. So how did you go through that? And, was there one moment in particular that stands out?
I think what I've learned in this journey is that mental health is something I have to cultivate every single day, right? It doesn't, the setup that we're all in is driving us towards feeling that burnout, feeling that anxiety, right? Feeling that exhaustion. And so I have to find ways of doing it. And I think that for me, the toughest moments have been to recognize when I'm the most like angry or frustrated. I've learned that that's often a sign that I'm not supported. I don't feel supported. And I'm not getting something that I need. Mm-hmm. And so through like honestly trial and error of just going through this year after year for 5 years since I started the company, and also simultaneously had the kids, right? So this all happened at the same time. I've had to sort of learn my own cues and then ask myself what I need. And a lot of times what I need is just like a timeout. Again, it's like a break. And it could be a day, it could be an evening. But I think we as women have to be okay with like letting ourselves off the hook. But we just go and we go and we go and we go to the point that there's diminishing returns. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's taking an Epsom salt bath at night. It's logging out of social media for a week. It's saying, you know what, it's really hard. It's really hard to leave. Like leaving right now feels impossible, right? And I've got 3 little kids. I've got a baby. I'm breastfeeding. But my husband and I are talking about, okay, like in a couple of weeks, I'm not going to be breastfeeding as much anymore, and I can pump when I'm gone, and I'm gonna go away for a night, right? And I have to. It's not because this is like some luxury item. This is a matter of survival and a matter of kind of coming back to myself and putting gas back in the tank. And I think I've had to learn that is a constant, and that needs to be regular and not be something that I wait until I'm freaking out to go do. Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk a little bit about another thing that makes Parsley unique in functional medicine, which is this idea of testing and going proactively, looking for those whys underneath our health. How can our listeners begin to ask the right questions of their medical providers to get underneath the root causes? Because so many of us have had experiences of making all the effort to get to a medical appointment only to kind of feel dismissed or not heard. So, what is the purpose of the diagnostic testing, and what does that reveal, and how can we, demand it, and any advice for those who want to get underneath some of their, chronic symptoms?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said it right. 1 in 5 women feel dismissed by their healthcare provider. Many more feel unheard. Women with chronic illness are often spending 7 years living with that illness, bouncing between primary care, specialist, Dr. Google, whatever, trying to figure it out, and just suffering with it and not getting answers. So this is really, really common if anyone's been experiencing that. And in the book, I walk you through some of the just basic blood tests that like any doctor can run, that can identify some of the underlying stuff that we just don't know we have, right? I think it's something like 70% of younger people don't have a primary care doctor or aren't going to them and getting regular testing. And I think that's not our fault, right? That's because we're told you only go to the doctor when you like feel bad, and we associate that with like a cold or a flu, or now maybe COVID. But our medical system is highly reactive, and we need to be proactively testing, because by the time you feel a high blood sugar or heart disease or an autoimmune disease, like the train has left the station. Like these things have really escalated to a point that your body is starting to experience damage. And so testing in depth for blood sugar, testing in depth for heart health, for thyroid. 1 in 5 women to 1 in 8, I've seen both, so I'll say both, will be diagnosed with a thyroid condition in her lifetime. I had a patient who, she was exhausted, depressed, gaining weight, dry skin, constipation, wasn't feeling great. Went to a regular doctor, 15-minute visit. Oh, you're unhappy. Here's an antidepressant. you're just getting old. She was in her 40s. She's like, I'm not that old, people. And so she came to see me, and we just by routine, we always proactively test thyroid health in depth when we start with somebody and she had an underlying thyroid dysfunction, and all the things I just listed were symptoms of that. And so in her case, the antidepressant medication wasn't going to do anything because it wasn't treating the right problem. So we look at thyroid, we look at certain nutrient levels, things like B12, folate, vitamin D, ferritin. These things are all really critical to be proactively testing. And so a lot of people will say, especially women, I find, oh, I'm perfectly healthy. I'm totally healthy. But my periods are really out of whack. I'm totally healthy, but I'm gaining weight and I can't figure out why. And like, it feels really weird. Like nothing I do matters. I'm totally healthy, but I'm just exhausted all the time. I'm totally healthy. But I have these headaches. I'm totally healthy, but I'm having trouble getting pregnant. The list goes on, right? And so we don't want to admit that we're not feeling well. We don't want to admit that something's going on, and then we're not getting support from our medical providers and proactively testing. So I walk through these tests in the book, and then I also give you the symptom score that we developed in-house at Parsley that's now being used in research at Stanford University and other places, where it's a quick symptom tracker, and it's like 2 minutes to fill out. You can do it in the book, or you can do it at parsleyhealth.com/insights. You can now just do it. You might have done it on your onboarding and experience that, but it tells you, it maps your gut health and your mental health and your hormone health and your musculoskeletal. And so it gives you a number. And that's important because, like, I don't know about you, but I can't remember what I had for lunch 2 weeks ago, let alone like the day-to-day levels of my various symptoms, and even when they started, or how bad they've been, or when they've gotten better, or what makes them better. And so this score is designed to be given every couple weeks. And it's really helpful because you can't direct yourself to where you're going if you don't know where you've started, if you don't know where you are. And so the testing plus the score kind of give us a starting place. And unlike a regular doctor, when you come to Parsley, when you sign up for Parsley, it's a program, right? You start. You don't wait. It's not like you sign up as a Parsley member and then you're like, okay, so I guess I'll wait till I have like a fever and then I'll come in, right? You begin. You begin with us with this in-depth intake, because I don't care how healthy you are or think you are. There is so much going on underneath the surface that now, through modern medicine, we have the power to understand. And that stuff could be really powerful to understanding what's going on with your body, and then beginning to connect the dots to how you feel.
There are many women, I mean, you pointed out the statistics, that live with chronic disease but don't know that they have chronic disease, especially disorders, especially autoimmune disease disorders. Why is it that women in particular seem to, suffer more from those kinds of autoimmune diseases? I read recently a little bit more research about what it is about pregnancy that may play a role, or even just our own fertility cycles. What do you want women to know about that autoimmune issue in particular?
So 80% of autoimmune is in women, and candidly, the reasons why are not well understood. The medical literature knows there's a connection between our hormones and autoimmune, and like, that's about it. And men do get autoimmune conditions, but women bear them disproportionately. They can take women out. They often take women out of the workforce, or really impact them in their 40s. It tends to be the era that they show up. Black women are a little bit more likely to develop an autoimmune disease, but all women can get them. And again, they're much more frequent in women than men. And I often see a first autoimmune presentation or flare postpartum. And the reason for that is during pregnancy, your progesterone's way up high, and then postpartum is when you have the baby, there's a big drop, and then there continues to be drops sort of along the way after that, which is why, again, we have that visit with our patients kind of 6 weeks postpartum, because the OB is not looking at any of this, and nor is your GYN. Just a regular GYN is not looking at any of this stuff. And so I'll see this a lot. Oh, I just had this weird eczema flare I've never had before. Or my eczema that I had 10 years ago or 20 years ago came back. All of a sudden I'm having joint pain. All of a sudden I'm having rashes, and so we always want to look at that, because that hormone fluctuation can be a trigger moment
Interesting.
for the symptoms. And the interesting thing about autoimmune for everyone listening, and this is a real range of conditions from lupus and things that cause joint pain and skin rashes to things that cause weakness and numbness to things that cause thyroid dysfunction and then weight gain, depression, the things I've talked about earlier. So there's a whole range of symptoms. And I think these are the kinds of symptoms that, back to what we said earlier, women take care of themselves last, they put themselves last, and they kind of just like live with them
You
until
live
they get
with
really,
it.
really bad.
You just, and then, I mean, I had a medical condition and my doctor just said, well, you have 4 kids. Like that was answer number 1, you know, not, and that was really disappointing, but it's true. I mean, we endure, right? But
We endure.
We do, and
Yes.
we have to, but we can endure better. And we can be treated better by medicine. We can demand better care, more holistic care. So,
And autoimmune in particular, I just want everyone listening to know, can be managed into remission or can be significantly improved. And so one of the reasons that a lot of women sort of have their doctors throw up their hands, well, they say you have these autoimmune markers or these symptoms, we'll wait till they get bad enough, and then we'll put you on either steroids, which have horrible side effects, or a very, very expensive biologic medication. And for people with really severe or late stage autoimmune diseases, those medications are really important. But what is missed is that a lot of these conditions can actually be aggressively managed into significant improvement or to go into remission. And so, example, I had a patient with a vasculitis called Behçet's, which had ulcers in her mouth, in her throat. She had acne, a very specific type of autoimmune disease. And she had all of the drugs that she had gone on from a top, autoimmune doctor in a top hospital in New York City hadn't worked. And so he'd basically fired her as a patient because his drugs weren't working and he didn't have anything else to offer her. But because in functional medicine, we understand the connection between the immune system and the gut, the microbiome, and nutrition, we were able to diagnose her with food sensitivities and food allergies, including wheat and dairy in particular, that were actually triggering her autoimmune flares. And so when she did what we call a gut healing protocol and went off of those foods completely, her disease largely went into remission and she's off all the drugs. And some of these drugs cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So it's important to understand that there is something that you can do. That stress is actually the number one trigger for an autoimmune flare. And that there's a lot we can do around your hormones, around stress, around nutrition, around allergies by connecting the dots in your body and not knocking the drugs. The drugs, again, can be really important and critical and life-saving tools. But I think a lot of women's and people's doctors don't know that. And so they think, well, I have nothing for you. So they say, well, you have 4 kids, as if that's an answer.
Right.
And that's obviously not an answer.
Well, you also talk a lot in the book about gut health. It feels like we're just learning more and more and more about the gut in general, and how incredibly powerful it is. So for those who are not familiar maybe with the sort of whole body impact of what happens in the gut, can you explain that, especially with a focus on female listeners? And then also, what should we be looking out for if we suspect something might be going on with our gut? Let's start there.
So your gut is a second brain. You have an entire, what's called enteric nervous system. 95% of the serotonin in your body is in your gut. 70% of your immune system's in your gut. Because if you think about it, your mouth is a portal to the outside world into your body. And so your immune system has to line that gut lining to make sure that nothing gets through that could kill you. So this is an evolutionary advantage. So you have this really sophisticated organ system and ecosystem in the gut that's really smart, is the point I'm trying to make. And then you have this ecology of microbes, so bacteria and fungi and all these things that live in the gut called the microbiome, which we hear a lot about in the news. And they're playing a big role there too. They are actually protecting the lining of your gut, and they're making even neurotransmitters that have impact on your mood and your brain and metabolizing your food for you and making sure you get certain nutrients. And the microbiome, by the way, is everywhere. It's on your skin, it's in your mouth, but there's a big concentration of it in the gut. And so The gut lining is this incredibly intricate and interesting system, and it's designed to protect us. But a lot of the things that we do destroy that beautiful ecosystem. Too many antibiotics, high stress can break down that lining, lots of alcohol. Ibuprofen and over-the-counter medications can really wreak havoc. If you take too many of them, you get bleeding and ulcers, as we know, we hear about that. But what we don't talk about enough is the low-grade damage that's happening before we get to the point of a bleeding ulcer. Foods that we're eating that are toxic to the gut lining. That could be gluten, the protein. Not everyone has a problem with gluten, but a lot of people can and do. And a lot of the chemicals that are in processed foods. So we are throwing grenades into our gut every day. You're like, ooh, stress, ibuprofen, alcohol, antibiotics, sugar, foods, right? Check.
Yeah, I did that this week.
Right. And I call these things core actions in the book, by the way, because they're not habits. Like what you eat every day isn't a habit. Biting your nails is a habit. What you do every day at your eating is like a core action. It's defining to who you are and how you feel. So I despise the word habits because I think it's dismissive of these things that are really powerful, defining in our lives. We eat 3 to more times a day, right? And so in the gut, when this phenomenon happens, all of the things I just said, you can get something called leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which is these microscopic gaps form in that gut lining, and there awaits 70% of your immune system trying to distinguish friend or foe. And when that happens day in and day out, your immune system can get triggered and create something called chronic inflammation. Basically, your immune system is always low grade on instead of being on when it needs to fight and off when it doesn't. And when that happens, it's kind of like this low grade burning fire in your body, and it can trigger things like autoimmune. And that autoimmune, depending on your genetics and what the trigger was, like I said, can manifest in these various types of autoimmune disease. And so there's absolutely a genetic predisposition for autoimmune disease, as well as a female predisposition. But as we learn in medicine, what do they say? Genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. So everything is a combination between your genetics and your environment and how they interact. Rarely is it genetics alone. And so what we think about a lot in functional medicine is looking again at that root cause, that gut level cause, and trying to identify what those triggers were or are that could be driving an inflammatory process in the body. And I learned all that through functional medicine and the study of functional medicine, and all of our providers here at Parsley are trained in primary care and in conventional medicine, but they also have the functional training. And it's through bringing them together that I think we seem to be helping quite a few people.
So in the book, at Parsley, but just in general, a lot of functional medicine doctors use this approach of a elimination diet, which doesn't sound fun because it's like you're eliminating things and I think you're taking my favorite foods away, but it really is an approach that helps people suffering or people who aren't maybe even aware of how much they may be suffering, to really understand what food is causing, what kinds of inflammation and responses within our body. So how do you actually do an elimination diet? What are you looking for when you go through those 30 days?
Yes, elimination diet does not sound fun, but it actually can be really fun because you get to explore all these other foods that you weren't eating as much. And I know I fall into food ruts all the time and like eat the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
So get out there, people, explore. So I consider an elimination diet like a fun experiment, right? It's not about foods are bad or certain foods are bad or good. It's not about weight loss. Nothing in this book, by the way, is about weight loss or how you look. It's all about how you feel. And so when we eliminate a couple foods, and the most common issues for people are gluten, which is a protein in wheat, dairy, or to some degree like sugar, just like too much sugar in the diet. So I recommend cutting those things out, especially the gluten and dairy, for 30 days. And that amount of time lets your body kind of finish processing what's there and allows that immune response, if there has been one, to go away. And so what you'll often see in that last week is more clarity, less brain fog, less bloating, fewer digestive issues, your acne clearing up, your eczema clearing up. I'm in a WhatsApp group called Modern Mamas. I'm sure many of us have these groups that we're in that really help us, and just of a group of friends. And someone was talking about their child having really bad eczema, and how they had taken their child off of dairy and how the eczema had gone away and all the creams and topicals and potions hadn't worked, and how she had used that herself as a cue that maybe her acne was a dairy issue, and going off of it, it cleared up. So the reason for the 30 days is you'll notice how what's different kind of in that last week or two when the body's cleared that immune response. And it can be a really powerful and instructive thing to do.
All right. There's another area that I think a lot of us, I know, speaking for myself, need some detox from. And that is our digital addictions. I think one of the things that was really refreshing in the book and reading about you and your approach is really calling out this moment that we are in as a culture and the role that technology is playing in our lives, and frankly, how unhealthy it is for us as people and mothers. We think when we talk about tech addiction, a lot of times we're talking about our kids, but it really is also, directly affecting us and our brains. Yet we've been in a pandemic. We're all living virtually. We're spending so much more time at home on our devices. And even before the pandemic, we know that moms actually spent more time on social media than non-moms because we live in a largely villageless world and we're all seeking connection. So what do you know about the temptation of technology, and how can we use it in a way that is healthy for us and not harmful?
Well, that feeling of using it more and needing connection is not just about that natural need. It's also because these platforms are addictive. They've been researched to be addictive. Mobile device addiction is an actual medical diagnosis. Okay, these things are real. They're not, oh, I shouldn't do that so much. It's like, no, really though, this is actually a medical condition. Everything from depleting the gray matter in our brains and really reshaping our brains to hijacking our biological reward systems, that dopaminergic reward system. By the way, dopamine reward system is also what cocaine rewards. So these platforms have been designed in such a way that they are, by design, something that's really hard to get off of. And the other thing that's been shown in the research is that screens are exhausting. And the last thing we need as moms is to be more exhausted. So technology is not going anywhere. It's how we work, it's how we shop, it's how we socialize, but we can't allow it to take over our lives. And part of me just hates this concept of the metaverse because so many of us are in some ways neglecting our real lives. So what I make as a recommendation in the book is to just set limits and boundaries, not to look at screens an hour before bed because these devices are really depleting our sleep quality, and then you feel exhausted the next day, and then you feel irritable, and then you're even crabbier, and then you eat the bad foods, and then you drink too much coffee, and then you drink wine to come down off the coffee, and then you're stuck, right? And then you don't sleep well again. So not looking at screens an hour before bed. Having screen-free mornings on weekends or a period of time, and just investing in your IRL life. Sunsetting your apps. I'm actually logged out of all my social platforms this week. I'm only logging in if I need to post something for work, and then I'm logging out immediately because while breastfeeding and pumping, I've been scrolling way too much, and I noticed that I was starting to kind of spin out. And I think for women in particular, these platforms have been shown to be incredibly disruptive to our self-esteem. And for teen girls' rates of suicide have skyrocketed, directly attributed to these platforms. So it's not that we're going to never use technology again and go live in the woods and cave it up, because that's not happening. But we have to take control and set boundaries and take seriously the impact of tech on our mental health, because it's real.
All right. Well, you've convinced me during this conversation with all just the medical evidence and all of your knowledge and wisdom about the power of functional medicine. for those who may not have access or just want to take some basic steps in their daily life, where do you think that an overburdened, exhausted mom could get started to go on the offense about her well-being this year?
Do something that feels good every single day, that puts your body in a rested and relaxed state when you're awake. So that's side of our nervous system that's in fight or flight that we're all in all day, every day, between pandemic and motherhood and work and email and all the things. We have another side of our nervous system that we can use to our advantage called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's our rest, digest, relax, and heal. So every night, because I don't know, I get these questions all the time, I'm sure you do too, about like a morning routine, and they're like, what's your morning routine? And I'm always like, I don't know, get up and like try to feed everyone and,
Yes.
and change all the diapers and like not like at some point get out of my house or like start my day and like realize whether I'm dressed or not.
That actually is such a good point. I mean, I've read every productivity book. I've read all of the like life hacking stuff, and very few of them, if any, talk about my life. Like, no, I can't get up earlier than I do to meditate because I've already been up all night long breastfeeding my baby, or I wake up when someone's screaming, "Mom," from down the hall. So we need an approach to wellness that is woven into the actual lives that we live, not one that is unattainable because we're not childless people.
Yeah. As parents, I think, and I can relate to the screaming mom, because I'm like, some days it's just like how many are screaming mom at the same time that I'm trying to decipher from upstairs listening. But the reality is there's no way that that's happening for me. So self-care is not happening in the morning. So once my kids are in bed at night, the day is over. That's my time. And that's where I think instead of maybe scrolling, whatever platform is your fave at the moment, it's an opportunity to take care. And that could be, I'll take an Epsom salt bath and do my meditation. And I follow people on, whether it's Instagram or any of the other platforms, or listen to a guided meditation, right? Because that can be beautiful to just listen to while I'm in the bath.
Love doing that.
Doing my yoga. It could be stressing, right? Love the bath.
I do.
Someone told me once, by the way, that Winston Churchill, the like famous, British leader in the Great Wars, he would like need to decide anything big. He would stop everything and draw a bath before he made any big decisions. And I was like, well, fuck, if he can do it before like going into battle against Germany, I can do.
Because, I love bathing in that way, in that sort of cleansing, healing way. And I was a religion reporter before launching Motherly, and the rituals of bathing and cleansing obviously are so prevalent in all religious traditions, and Winston Churchill did it. So there's got to be something going on there in the way that we relate to water. We evolved out of water. There's something there about, people say self-care isn't all bubble baths, but I don't know. For a lot of us, it is, actually.
Like, for me, it absolutely is. The shower is also a place where, like, I can largely be alone. I'm not looking at my computer.
Yeah.
And so I just think that building that time in for yourself that makes you feel good every single day is not a luxury. It's not a nice to have. It's a need to have. It's a survival mechanism. And it is the moment when you refill your tank, because it will be empty the next day. And so I encourage everyone who's a parent to think about it that way.
At Motherly, we believe that motherhood really brings out our superpowers. Those are really amazing talents or insights or wisdom, characteristics about us that often we didn't know were there until we became a mother. So I'm wondering, Robin, what is your superpower?
I thought I was good at multitasking before, and now I've taken that to an absolute another level. But I don't know. I would have two superpowers. One's very concrete. One is that I'm a speed reader, and I always have been. And so that's something that I can just like, it saved me. It saved me in med school. It saves me in work. It saves me in all the things. And then my other superpower, I would say that motherhood really showed me, was back to what I shared at the very beginning, was that I thought that motherhood would take away. But instead, motherhood showed me that I can be a mom and have this really specific and beautiful relationship with my kids while also running a company and having that type of relationships with everyone who I work with, while being a doctor, while being a partner, while being a friend. And it showed me that I was more than I thought I was. And so for me, it just showed me that I have this expansiveness to me that I think I told myself that I wasn't going to have. And I thought that was probably, again, that big surprise.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Dr. Robin Berzin, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your wisdom on the Motherly Podcast.
Thank you for having me.